My wife slid her grocery bags onto the counter, looked at the sandwich I was making, and said the words that ended something in me I didn't know was still breakable after 18 years of marriage. Buy your own food, stop living off me. I set the knife down slowly. Excuse me, you heard me, Mark. Diane didn't even look up, unpacking a bag of organic strawberries she'd bought only for herself lately, a habit I'd noticed but never mentioned. I'm tired of feeding a grown man who can't be bothered to contribute. I'd lost my job 4 months earlier. 19 years at the plant, gone in a restructuring memo that took less time to read than it took to destroy my sense of who I was. I'd been applying everywhere, taking interviews that led nowhere, picking up handyman work on weekends for cash that barely covered gas money. I contributed everything I had left to give. Apparently it wasn't enough anymore, or maybe it never had been the point. I said nothing. I picked up my plate, walked to the garage, and ate my sandwich sitting on an overturned bucket next to my toolbox, because at least out there nobody was counting what I put in my mouth. That was 6 weeks before her birthday. I want to tell you I confronted her that night, that we had some big conversation about respect and partnership and 18 years of marriage vows. We didn't. Diane wasn't someone you confronted easily. She'd perfected a particular tone over the years, one that made you feel crazy for being hurt by things that were technically just words. I'm just being honest, Mark, don't be so sensitive. So I stayed quiet, I kept applying for jobs, and I started paying closer attention to things I'd been too tired, too depressed, too beaten down to notice. Diane had been working late 3 nights a week for 2 months. She'd started buying clothes I never saw her wear at home. Her phone, always face down on the counter now, buzzed constantly with notifications she'd silence the second she noticed me nearby. I didn't say anything about that either, not yet. 2 weeks after the sandwich comment, my daughter Bethany called me, 26 years old, sharp as a tack, and worried in a way she tried and failed to hide. Dad, I saw Mom's car at the Riverside Grill on Tuesday. Around 7. She said she was working late. Maybe she stopped for takeout. Dad, Bethany's voice went quiet. She was sitting with someone, holding hands across the table. Someone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to a woman who told me to buy my own food while she was apparently buying dinner for somebody else 3 nights a week, and I felt something harden in my chest that had nothing to do with grief anymore. I didn't confront her. I got smarter instead. I started keeping a folder, the kind of folder I never thought I'd need to keep on my own wife. Credit card statements I could still access since the account was joint. Charges at Riverside Grill, the same evenings Diane claimed she was working late. A hotel charge in a town 40 minutes away, dated the weekend she'd told me she was visiting her sister. I called her sister casually under the excuse of asking about a family recipe. Her sister hadn't seen Diane in over a month. The picture assembled itself piece by piece, and every piece made the sandwich comment make more sense. Diane hadn't been complaining about money. She'd been trying to push me out quietly, meanly, hoping I'd get so worn down by humiliation that I'd leave on my own and save her the mess of an actual conversation. I decided her birthday would be the day I stopped being quiet. I didn't plan a scene. I'm not built that way, and honestly, I didn't need one. I planned something simpler and I think sharper. Diane had been talking for weeks about a birthday dinner at Bellamy's, the nice restaurant downtown, the one she'd been dropping hints about since August. She invited her sister, a few friends, her mother. I offered to make the reservation myself, told her I wanted to do something special for her this year. She actually smiled at that. First real smile she'd given me in months. The dinner started normal enough. Compliments on the restaurant, wine poured, her mother telling old stories. Then right as the waiter brought out the cake, I stood up, tapped my glass and said I had something to share before we sang. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, I said, and Diane's smile was still in place, still waiting for something sweet. I also want to be honest about something because I think Diane values honesty. She told me a few weeks ago that I should buy my own food, that I was living off her. I've thought about that a lot since then. The table went quiet in that particular way tables go quiet when they sense something's about to shift. So I did some thinking about what I've actually been contributing. I continued, pulling a folder out from under my chair, the same one I'd built over the past month. And I found some interesting things about where our household money's been going instead. Riverside Grill, 6 times in 2 months. A hotel in Danforth. The same weekend Diane told me she was visiting Carol. I looked at her sister. You weren't visited, were you, Carol? Carol's face had gone white. Diane's hand holding her wine glass had gone completely still. Mark, don't do this, Diane said, low, urgent, glancing around at the table full of witnesses she'd invited herself. I'm not doing anything you didn't already do first, I said. I just stopped staying quiet about it. Her mother's fork clattered against her plate. Diane, is this true? I hadn't planned to say the man's name. I didn't even know it for certain until that moment, watching Diane's face crumble in a way I'd never seen in 18 years, watching her realize the folder in my hands had more in it than she'd hoped. Greg, I said, reading from a credit card statement showing a joint charge for 2 dinner reservations under that name. That's who's been having dinner with my wife on the nights she's been working late. Your coworker, right, Diane? The one you mentioned exactly once, months ago, and never again. Diane stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped. This is not the place. You made it the place when you decided my grief over losing my job was a good excuse to humiliate me in my own kitchen, I said, and my voice didn't rise, it just went very, very steady. You wanted me gone quietly. I'm not leaving quietly. You are. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the cake. I sat back down and let 18 years of accumulated silence do the talking that the folder had already started. Diane left the restaurant 15 minutes later alone, her mother too stunned to follow her, her sister too ashamed to meet anyone's eyes. I paid the bill on my own card, the last thing I'd buy for her, and drove home in a silence that felt less like grief and more like relief. The divorce took 5 months. Diane tried to argue for more than her fair share, citing my unemployment as evidence I couldn't support myself, and I nearly laughed out loud in the mediator's office. My attorney simply produced the same folder, expanded now with 3 more months of evidence her own lawyer hadn't accounted for. The judge wasn't interested in her version of events once the paper trail spoke for itself. I got a new job 2 months after the birthday dinner, not glamorous but honest, running logistics for a regional distributor, better pay than I'd had at the plant. I bought my own groceries every week after that, and something about pushing that cart down the aisle, paying with my own card, felt less like defeat and more like the first real breath I'd taken in a year. Bethany still brings up that dinner sometimes, usually laughing, usually shaking her head at how calm I'd stayed while everything came apart at that table. You didn't even raise your voice, she said once. Didn't need to, I told her. Some truths are loud enough on their own. Diane married Greg 18 months later in a small ceremony her mother didn't attend. I heard through Bethany that the marriage didn't survive its 2nd anniversary. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that. I just felt like a chapter had finally, quietly closed itself. I think about that sandwich sometimes, eaten alone on an overturned bucket in a cold garage, and how small she'd made me feel with 6 words. It took weeks of silence to build the evidence that made those 6 words cost her everything. I never raised my voice once. I never needed to. Some people mistake quiet for weak. I've learned it's usually just patience, waiting for the exact right moment to stop being quiet at all.